I am happily abed when the boom comes. Post the boom, there is a second of silence, then elements below squawking in alarm, and some of the livelier voters trying to calm them. I don't move myself. I am ancient, and what I've learned of booms is that there's not much you can do about them. There's a boom, and then you're dead, or you're not. No amount of flapping will make any difference. Best to just perch down and wait. And seeing as I was already perched nicely, best for me to do nothing. I drift then for a few minutes more, and almost find my way back to sleep when the squawking comes again.
Osskah! Osskah!
A perk of dying is you can be rude as you like, and no voter will dare pass comment, so I ignore them a bit more. The cries don't stop, though.
Osskah! Osskah!
On, and there's no way I'm getting back to sleep with all that.
For the love of Tommy!
I shouts down at them.
Can't you let an old voter lie in peace? Osskah!
Comes back some chirpy voter.
There's someone for saving you. It's a god. A god have crashed to Earth. Another one?
I says.
But this one haven't killed nobody yet. We thought he might be a helping god more than a harming one.
It strikes me that a god who has the whole sky to swoop round but still manages to slam his chariot into the side of a mountain probably isn't going to be much help to voter nor element, but I keep that thought strictly personal. Such observations, I have noted, tend to dishearten one's flock. In a spirit of cooperation, I send down the lift thing that some helpful voters rigged up when my infirmity worsened enough to leave me no longer properly mobile, and wait for the god to ascend. Tell truth, he doesn't look like much. He is bare, apart from fur growing out the top of his head, which flops and curls on either side of his face, foolishly covering his ears. He has decked himself out in layers and layers of cloth to keep warm and decent. A black top layer that opens at the front, and which stretches in tubes to surround his forelimbs. Underneath this, a layer cut low at the front, shiny and mottled and held shut with discs of bone stuff or claw stuff. Then beneath this is a white layer, tight under his chin with another piece of brown-green cloth tied round it to make sure the nakedness of his neck stays hidden. Both his eyes face forwards. His ears appear to be entirely immobile. He is a blinking, soft-looking, juicy-looking thing. Like prey. "You're a god then, are you?" I says to him. The thing picks himself out from the chair, stands on his 2 feet, looks down, wobbles a bit, grabs a bit of bark for anchorage, bark comes off, he scrabbles about, wobbles some more, eventually loses balance altogether, and collapses down on his knees. "Because I must let you know," I tells him, "we already have a god of our own, and he is much too grand to put in personal appearances. So if you've come here with thoughts of recruitment, you'll find yourself pecking on stony ground indeed."
"Sorry,"
he says.
"I'm not sure what you're getting at. Still a bit dizzy from the crash."
"Yeah," I says. "We heard a boom. That was you, was it?" He nods. "Chariot all broken now, is it?"
"Hurt,
He goes.
but not broken."
"Oh, and I expect you're going to be needing us to make various kinds of sacrifice to fix it for you. That being the usual form with most of the littler gods who've swooped on us lately."
"No,
He goes.
my chariot will fix herself. Give her a couple of hours."
"What? No sacrifices?" I says. He shakes his head, and this somehow strikes me as meaning no. I say to him, "You sure you're a god?"
"What exactly,"
He goes.
"would happen if I told you I wasn't a god?"
"Well," I say, "mood I'm in now. We'd probably snap such limbs as you have, then throw you to the elements for hunting practice. Why do you ask?"
"No real reason.
He says.
Idle curiosity. I'm a god, and let's give it no further thought."
"What's your call, then?"
God who doesn't want any sacrifices.
I
he says.
am a singular, unique, specific healer, person of learning.
I get a bit tricksy and pretend I didn't hear, so he has to say all that again. This second time, I don't watch him full on. I make like I'm tracking something else, and glimpse what I can out of one eye. When I'm not really looking at him, the words I hear don't match up with the movements his mouth hole is making. He must be making nonsense noises and changing them to sense in my head. You'd think gods would be able to just speak sensible language and leave people's heads alone, but no. They prefer to go the showy route, always.
What is it you want then, specific healer, if not sacrifices?
Specific healer looks at me with his weird flat face and same-way eyes, and does nothing for a bit. I find myself hopping from foot to foot and blinking, and for the first time feeling the least bit of properly godly fear of this creature.
What do I want?
He goes.
Yeah, I says. As in, why did you come, godly one?
I crashed here.
He goes.
I didn't mean to come here. You know I crashed. Your people came and found me.
And I realize that when Specific Healer says he crashed, he didn't just fly his chariot into a mountain due to drunkenness or inattention, which is per usual for gods. He properly crashed because he was out of control and had no choice.
There is a storm in heaven,
he says.
Oh, I know,
I tells him.
We guessed as much from all the signs in the sky, and artifacts falling to earth which glow and sing with little godly power.
My people were trying to bring the storm to an end,
he says.
We failed. I fell to earth. You found me.
With that, he sits down.
Got anything to eat?
He says. I call below, and a couple of elements flutter up with 5 or 6 different kinds of meat and plant. They look on this god thing sprawled on my floor, its limbs stuck out at angles that mean they should be broken. They're shocked, but thankfully long enough out of the ground that they didn't say nothing, nor stare too much, nor try to pick the god thing up and throw it round the room for a chasing game. I send them away before their hold over themselves fails, and they do something playful and disastrous.
What are you going to do then? I says.
Do?
He goes.
Well, I suppose wait.
Dying or otherwise, I am still given to watch the safety of the flock, and all the stories tell that when gods fly along with people, sooner or later the people end up getting clawed. Maybe the god doesn't mean it to happen, but that's just the way it is. Gods are bad news for people. That's why White Tommy stays hidden. I says,
couldn't you do anything to help your chariot along? Get you on your way faster?
He looks up at me, and I think he's going to mark me for my presumption, but no. There's a stiffening in his arms, like he's going to rise into action, but it barely lasts a beat, and then it's gone.
My chariot's wiser than me in lots of ways.
He goes.
Best I don't interfere. Most likely I'll slow her down if I get my fingers in there.
So he knows I want him gone, and he really doesn't care. That's the way it is with gods. White Tommy cares what happens to us, and that's what makes him worth tracking. Most of the gods wouldn't fart our way on a still day unless it suited some plan of theirs. Specific Healer starts poking at the plants and meats now, trying them none too happily. He takes a bite of rock crawler pipe and says,
What's this?
I tells him it's rock crawler pipe, but he doesn't understand, so I show him a rendering of a rock crawler, and he goes,
Right, a kind of lizard thing.
I goes,
Yeah, and what you're eating there, it's pipework, where it breaks down all its own prey, which we reckon's the tastiest bit because it's got remains of all the sliders and squeakers and headhole grubs that rock crawler's been swooping on.
Specific Healer makes a noise like throat-clawed prey, then spits out the half-chewed pipe. On instinct, I catch the meat mid-air and pop it in my own mouth. You hear some say it's sacrilege to let a thing touched by a god fall to earth, and though it's an old saying and not strictly what White Tommy holds by, I'm an ancient thing and I forget what I am sometimes. Specific Healer tracks me doing this and says nothing, so I guess I've done well keeping to the old ways before him. He picks up the next bowl of meat.
Now this is a bit better.
He goes.
What's this?
What he has chosen is as well a bit of rock crawler pipe, but swallowed, pre-digested and hawked up again by a mother for her young elements. It strikes that getting specific healer to eat anything might lift him and have him up and off and flying away in his chariot before the sum of all evil gets here, so I says to him, "What you are eating is the pulped fruit of the Juba Wuba tree. It grows plentifully nearby. We can get you more of that if you want."
Yes,
he says,
that'd be kind of you.
and he reaches for my call and can't find it.
Forgive me.
He says,
I'm rattled from the hard landing. I haven't asked your call.
"Don't you worry," I says. "I've learned all about hard landings these last few seasons." I sing my call for him, and he tries to sing it back, but though he's making nonsense noises with his shiny, soft mouth parts and reaching into my head to make it sense, he can't get my call right. He tries and tries, but gets nowhere close. It seems to shadow him deeply that he can't make my call.
There we go.
He says to me.
I can't even do that proper.
"Never mind," I tells him. "Call me Osskah. That's the noise the youngest elements make for me before their call pipes are properly formed. You can do that, can't you? You can say Osskah, can't you?"
Yes, I can say Osskah.
He goes.
I can do that, at least.
And he fixes me with those front-on eyes of his and tracks me close. And it strikes me that getting my call wrong is maybe only the worm's tip of the matter. All of a sudden, I'm so nervous I want to fold up like a newborn element and wait for Mum to swoop home with a belly full of crawler meat to puke into my gaping mouth. The pain comes in my pipes, and I figure if sprawling on the floor is good enough for a god, it's good enough for an old voter like me. So I perch down and rest my belly on the ground. Not an elegant pose, but one that pains me least.
Do you hurt?
Specific healer says. "Yes, I do," I tells him. "But not to worry. My hurts won't continue much longer. Soon my elements will go back to the earth, and my thoughts to White Tommy for safekeeping till the end of days."
You've soared high to see the end of your days as such a little thing.
Specific healer says. "You've not quite tracked me straight there," I tells him. "I fret plenty about my end, but I fret for my flock. Things have been hard these last few turns. Bad winters, cold sun, signs in the sky, and harming gods swooping in. And there's no young voter ready to take lead of the wing. So for myself, you're right. I've soared high, and there's nothing I'd like more than a nice slow glide back to the earth. But for my flock, I'd see out a few more seasons yet."
Are you sure of that?
Specific healer says. "Sure, I'm sure," I tells him.
Because you might not want to be leading the wing.
He goes.
Through what is to come. You might prefer to be spared that.
He says this, and it's so quiet and clear that again I get a little shot of godly fear.
Because I could help you.
Specific healer says.
This that's paining you now, I could take it out and fix it, and you'd have lead of the wing for a few more seasons at least.
Now I'm an ancient thing. Tell truth is, I'm ready to fly east in someone else's trail. Of course I'd worry about some young voter plotting a path for the flock, but that's the way of things. Except now it's not. Now, according to Specific Healer, the way of things is I get to stay in the lead, and stay there while we get through all sorts of roughness and chop. I'm not ashamed to say, I need a moment or two to take in this new-looking territory ahead. Whatever storm is coming, I tells him, I'll cut the wind so the flock flies safe in my trail. I'm not afraid.
You should be,
he says, and he pulls out a little straight silver stick that makes a briny noise like jumper song and glows blue at the end. What's that then? I says. That buzzy thing.
This is my non-specifically superlative steel claw construction device. It's going to help me work out what's paining you.
How's a steel claw going to help that? I goes, a bit nervous of the noise.
I did say it was a superlative steel claw.
He goes.
And superlative in non-specific ways. Now shut your chirping and let me think.
And he prods his superlative steel claw in my guts and at my head, and makes all sorts of noises from his mouth parts that he doesn't bother to put into sense in my mind, 'cause these noises have more to do with breathing out heavily and breathing in sharply than making any kind of sensible song. Is sort of how he goes.
Wish the old girl was in better shape. She'd be a help now.
And then he puts away his superlative steel claw all of a sudden and says,
Never mind. An ability to improvise is the key to all successful traveling light, and since I'm traveling light right now, improvising successfully is what I'm all about. Perhaps you could be so good,
he says,
as to have brought to me such medical implements as are available, and I'll see what I can do.
I whistle up our cookman herbalist with his potions, and our butcher surgeon with her iron hooks and steel claws, and the specific healer makes more humming noises and other heavy outbreaths.
Right,
He says in the end.
There's going to be no way of doing this that isn't going to get messy.
That's fine, I says. Mess can be cleared. Plenty of elements for mess clearing.
Also, the procedure is going to take a fair time and will introduce you to a whole new horizon of hurtfulness. I don't suppose,
He says.
There's any chance your people have control over your body's pain reporting systems?
No, we don't, I says. But I do have a flask of triple fermented thornberry juice which will knock me unconscious within about 2 flaps of me emptying it down my pipes. Obviously, I don't mind pain and would never take refuge in drink this way for myself.
Obviously not, no,
says specific healer. But if there's some chance you'll be knocked off path by my screams and curses, then I'll do what I must for the sake of your clear tracking.
That would be an idea,
He says.
But I'm going to need you conscious to tell me I've hooked up all your feeling bits proper.
Oh, right then, I say. Maybe a tiny tot of the thornberry juice then, just for luck.
You carry on,
He goes, and he's not really paying attention to me. He's got his superlative steel claw, and he's rubbing it against one of the butcher surgeon's steel claws, and little bits of the butcher surgeon's steel claw are coming off almost in a powder, till its blade is thinner than a strand of leaper hair.
Perhaps best you don't watch what I'm doing,
He says.
or even think about it. Try to think about something else entirely, something nice.
I see the track of your thought, but I have a feeling distraction's going to be hard to come by with you putting claws and hooks in my pipes.
Yes, I see that,
says he. He goes quiet for a moment. I can tell his hands are moving below my line of clear sight, and every element in me wants to look full on, but I elect not to obey. On my belly is what feels like tickling, almost, and a sudden coldness, and my head goes a bit cloudy, but still I keep staring straight into specific healer's eyes.
You like the stars, Osskah?
Oh yes, I like them well enough, I says. I have a feeling he's fetched this little wormful right out of my head. No need, 'cause I've got pictures and drawings of stars all over my place. But as I say, that's God's for you. The showy route. Always.
Yes, I track how that must work. Your people able to swoop where you please, but even if you reach the very edge of the sky, the stars still beyond you.
You've been to the stars, Lord. I know it's weak-winged for me to be calling some little naked god my lord, but when a man's got blades in your soft parts, you're either polite or you're a fool.
I've been to the stars many times, yes.
There's a definite stab in my guts, and I have to hold on hard not to rake my claws across Pacific Healer's face and throw him across the room. He waits for me to catch myself, and then he carries on.
And once,
He goes,
I spoke to a star.
How so, Lord?
There was a world in danger. Their sun had begun to die, suddenly, without warning. The people moved all their flocks to a new planet, a new sun, and that sun began to die. The people were exhausted from their trek between the stars, but they were a stubborn bunch, and they resolved to send as many as they could to the next sun. So the youngest and brightest were put on another chariot, sent to still another star, and yet within a year, this star too began to flicker and dim. It was as if the stars were sickening, and these people carried the infection with them. Any star they migrated to, they would destroy. They were doomed, and so they called for me.
And did you cure the star sickness?
At first I didn't bother trying, because who ever heard of a star getting sick? Especially not some sickness that might be catching. No, I went looking for some enemy of these poor people, who had the means to mess around with several different stars' pipework. But there was nothing. Nobody who had the power to play around with suns, and who wanted to kill these people off. So then I started to think, a sickness is just a form of life. We call it a sickness because it interferes with us. It makes us ill. If it doesn't interfere with us, we call it a crawler, or a leaper, or a slider, or a person. Could there really be a star sickness, Something living right inside a sun?
I'm surprised you didn't think of that first, I says. White Tommy lives right in the heart of our own sun, and he's very happy there indeed.
Yes,
says the specific healer.
I'm sure he's got no complaints at all. It turned out the things living inside all three of these stars were making the stars burn cold, so the people on the planets froze.
And did you kill the sickness and make the stars well?
Why would I do that?
He says.
I'd never tracked anything that lived in a star before. I'm not saying the people on the planets didn't deserve saving. I'm just saying all sorts of planets have people living on them. People are all over the place, but things that can live in stars, you don't track them too often.
He stopped speaking for a moment, and really quick I was tracking a heavy, heavy coldness in my belly.
As it turned out, things were much more worse than I thought. These creatures that lived in the stars, they had spread with the people, but they were also spreading by themselves, much slower but much wider, floating through space. They could in the end turn the whole galaxy dark and leave it too cold for any other creatures at all. So we decided we would have to do something about the star creatures. Not exterminate them, but limit them to a single sun. We found a way we thought we could kill them, and were about to launch it at one of the infected stars, but the star started blinking at us.
Blinking?
On and off, in a signal. The star creature was becoming a thinking thing, and it had been watching us, and figured what we were up to. It knew we were trying to kill it, and it was begging us to stop. My chariot learned the star creature's language, and we realized the creature was barely an element, really just a hatchling. And it wasn't that there were many creatures in the different infected stars. All the living things in each of the stars were part of one creature. Spread across 3 stars, the creature had grown big enough to think. If we let it grow into more stars, it would become cleverer and wiser. Every star in the galaxy would be part of one great mind. The creature said it would unlock all the secrets of the universe, if only I would let it grow. I had to choose. I could kill the most wonderful creature in the galaxy, or let this star creature snuff out everyone else.
Right, I says. So you killed it. And that's dead sad, but what else could you do, really?
No,
He says.
No, I goes. Then how come we're still here? How come the stars aren't all dead and cold?
the thing is, Osskah, all the world we track is just one universe amongst billions, each existing next door and slightly up from and directly hyper-south of the other.
Obviously, I didn't understand any of this, but it's the kind of nonsense talk that lots of gods and even some of our more wing-leading theologians indulge in, so I let it flutter by unclawed.
And most of these universes are no good for anything. The numbers came out all unlucky, so they've got no atoms and no complex molecules, or they've just not got enough gravity to pull themselves together. It can all go wrong in a billion equally boring ways, and all you're left with is cold, dark soup of matter and antimatter, quietly wasting away over the gigaseasons. Then you've got a few universes good for life, and life has arisen in all of those. And in all of those, life depends on having bright, shiny, healthy suns. But I figured, if there are more universes than you can ever think about, surely there must be one that has suns, but is otherwise no good for other life. So I just had to sort through billions of universes until I found the right one, and we clawed ourselves a rift in space-time, and shoved the 3 living suns through. The star thing had a universe to call its own.
And what about the people? I goes.
The people.
He says.
Who'd lost their sons? Who you'd been called to save?
I'm sure
He goes.
someone will have looked after them. I went through to the new universe with the star thing. I watched it grow till it was living in every one of 1 trillion suns. I watched ripples of light washing across galaxies, and I was watching the thoughts of a god. Not a little god like me, Osskah, but a true god. I stayed for 19 million seasons, watching and learning, and gradually I could figure just the merest flavor of what the creature was thinking from the play of light across its universe. Sometimes the creature would remember me and try to speak to me directly, but it was no good. It had moved beyond me. I was like a fresh hatchling trying to take in the work of the world's greatest poet. Every time it spoke to me, I wept in frustration at what little I could understand, and then wept again out of joy that such a creature could exist. And then a call came from home, In our universe, just 7 seconds had passed. There was another emergency, and I was needed.
Specific Healer stops, brings his superlative steel claw up to his face and fiddles with it. The light on the end glows with a blue that is almost white. I didn't look, but in my belly now I feel heat, and I smell flesh smoke.
As I made to leave that universe, I saw a great wave, a pulse of deep red blossoming between the suns. I asked the star thing what had happened. It told me it had found a mate.
Specific Healer switches off his superlative steel claw, and the blue light dies. He sits back, and with his mouth parts makes a movement I take to be a smile.
That's as much as I can tell you, I think. How are you feeling?
I'm all right, I figure.
Good,
He says.
You were very brave through all that.
I tried my best,
Yes, you did.
Specific Healer says.
And so did I.
I am grateful as a worm-fed hatchling, Lord,
Osskah, listen.
he says.
Without proper tools, without knowing more about your people's internal workings, without even my chariot in fit shape to help.
And then he stops himself.
I'm so very sorry, Osskah. I couldn't save you. I tracked like I could, but it was beyond me.
He gets up and walks over to a corner and just sits down again, sort of curled up against the wall. For a bit, I don't know what to say, though I'm not one who falls for little gods. This particular god had a way about him made me take he'd do what he said he could. But all of a sudden that way had gone, and there was this small, featherless thing, crouched against my nest wall, shivering. Across my belly I could feel warm, raised scar lines, and it made me shiver to think of this lonesome god's hands meddling with my pipework. Won't do no harm, then, to have a little bit more thornberry juice to steady the system, I says. Specific Healer doesn't say nothing, so I pour myself a tot. You'll not have one yourself?
May as well.
He goes, and takes a tot of the stuff, sinks it down and holds out his cup for more. His clawless hands are so tiny he's to hold his cup with both of them. Raising it up to me, he looks like a little element come to his voting ceremony, asking for Osskah's word and blessing. I pour him a shot more, and he sinks that one too.
May as well.
He says.
May as well just sit and drink this stuff with you. Let my chariot fix herself, then fly off and save herself. Maybe someone will be a fit master to her. Doesn't look like I am. Can't even fix one little broken creature who needs to live a couple more seasons for the sake of the flock. Can't even do that.
And it's like he can't think of a word then, or he can't find the word in my talk, 'cause his mouth part makes movements, but nothing comes in my head. I sit quiet and still for a while, and have a little think and let the god sip his cup. Then, when I've thought what to say, I start speaking again. Yeah, I says. I felt like you do often enough. All these hard seasons gone past. A lot of times I wish the voters would choose someone else to lead the wing. Or I wished I was just a little element, new sprung from the ground. Or I wished I was an old bird, too scrambled for voting and going back to play with the elements once more. I wished all those things, but in the end, it came to me asking why I was the bird in front.
Pray tell, wise Osskah,
He says.
I'm dying to hear. Just like you're dying to tell, I suppose.
He laughed a bit at that, but I didn't track it on purpose. Because it's an easier path in the end. It seems hard because it's you that's got to cut the wind and make a path for your flock. But it's easier, because you've got the things to do and the choices to make. The ones that follow, they fly your trail, fearing the worst and hoping for the best. You're the leader. You're busy with the what and the how, and you don't have time to worry on the why and the what if.
Yeah, well, you might have to forgive me,
He says.
but I think maybe the whys and what ifs I have to worry on are a little grander than the ones that might trouble you.
I could tell the thornberry juice was having an effect, even though his pipework was not a person's, but a god's, because his speech was getting cloudy in my head, and more there was this sneery thing in his face that hadn't been there before. Well, I'm sure you're right about that, but we have been through hard times ourselves. Only 100 seasons ago,
White Tommy came down from the heart of the sun and introduced himself to us. Before then, we followed Red Tommy. Red Tommy said whenever someone flew against your track, you should claw them to show your track was the right way. Following Red Tommy meant we was clawing each other almost every day and night, sometimes whole flocks rising up to fight. Then White Tommy came and said if someone flew against your track, you don't claw them, but you stand ready to take a clawing, to show your track is the right way. And lots of the people saw straight this would lead to a lot less clawing overall, so we switched to White Tommy's way and kindly requested Red Tommy to depart. But there was one flock held to Red Tommy's way. Anybody disagreed with them, they got to clawing pretty fast. And so when they came up against the White Tommy flocks, only one thing happened.
The White Tommy flock got clawed, and the Red Tommy flock got their way,
says Specific Healer. Well, that's the least gruesome form of words for putting it across, so that's the way we'll choose. The Red Tommy flock went about clawing and killing, with none of the other flocks ready to claw them back. This went on for season after bloody season, till finally there was only the Red Tommy flock left. All the other flocks were killed, right down to the last element and hatchling. And the elder of the Red Tommy flock thought he was the wisest bird ever to take to the skies, for now they had the whole land and sky to swoop in, and all play that walked or hopped or crawled was theirs.
They sound like a lovely bunch of birds,
Specific Healer says. They were foolish birds, and not lovely at all, I answers. And then all of a sudden Specific Healer stops and looks up, and he sends a sneery smile my way. He says,
"That was you, wasn't it? Your lot were the Red Tommy flock, who slaughtered your brothers and sisters."
And I hang my head, as I have done all these seasons when I remember what passed when I was a young bird, and didn't know nothing about the turning of the world, and was tough enough to claw anyone who tried to tells me better. That was us, yes, I says. And that was me, their leader. And almost the day the slaughter was finished, and so pleased and proud of ourselves, we learned what our error had been. Half our elements came down with spit fever, and the herbalist cookman came to me and said, "Osskah, the young elements is dying. What we gonna do?" And I said, "Dying of spit fever? How come? Every element gets spit fever, and every element gets better. I had it when I was just an hour hatched, and I'm the toughest bird in skies." But of course, in the really old days, elements used to die of spit fever all the time. Then an herbalist cookman in the North Cliffs flock made a paste that cured it, and more of everyone's elements lived. But now the North Cliffs flock was gone. We'd killed their full-grown, then had sport dropping their hatchlings into the sea, and swooping on them if they looked like swimming. And it carried on like this. With each new day, there was something we'd taken for granted that now we'd lost. Something we used to trade with other flocks. Some knowledge only other flocks had. Some trade other flocks were better at, and we'd long since given up practicing. After 10 seasons, the flock was a third of what it had been, even though we had the whole of the land and sky to take prey from. And those of us that lived, all we had was to think about what we'd done, how our own hatchlings were dying, and it was all our own fault, because we'd killed so many others. And it was then I was gladdest to be leader. The rest of the flock had to mourn the lost, and ponder on how the loss had come. I was spared. I had no time to mourn. I had to be planning and tacticking hard as I could, just in hope that the flock could survive. Things like, should we nurse our spit-fevered hatchlings, or should we let them die quickly? We couldn't spare to waste food on hatchlings as we're going to die anyway. But it was sapping the hearts of voters, not to even try to keep their young alive. So what? What to do?
"What did you do?"
says Specific Healer. "It doesn't matter," I tells him. "We did the wrong thing. Either way it was the wrong thing. But we're here. We lived. And even though voters say to me, 'I wouldn't like to have to make a choice like that, Osskah,' the voters are wrong. Better to get to be the one who chooses, I think. Lucky to be the one who chooses, and not to be the little one who has choices made for him." I watched the god for a bit. "Don't you agree, Specific Healer?"
Specific Healer says nothing, holds out his cup for a shot more, so I go on. It came to me that half the problem was we didn't think we should survive after what we'd done to our brothers and sisters. And so I requested Red Tommy to depart and asked White Tommy to take us as his own. I was expecting we'd scourged and punished for what we'd done, but White Tommy said he wouldn't punish us no further, as we had so much punished ourselves. And he said he was willing to be our guide and our light, and give us right and reason to survive. He said for us to remember that nothing is lost. When you fly high and peer down at the long turn of the world, you see everything that was leads to everything that is. So all the other flocks were with us, 'cause the loss of them was what made the world we lived in.
Well, I hope that was comfort to you,
says Specific Healer. I don't know, I says. It's a bit theological for me, but White Tommy is a practical god. He sends lift to them that flap their wings. So now we are a gathering flock, a collecting flock, a remembering flock. We swoop the skies looking for all trace of the brothers and sisters we lost. We find their remains, their nests, their tools. We remember their stories, their science, their jokes, their silliness, and we put it all here. And I show him the book. He stands and comes over and struggles to lift its great covers. And this has kept me going. The tending of the flock, the writing of the book. It was an easier path to be the bird charged with saving us all. I am glad I had these tasks for my mind and muscles, because without them, the mourning would have been too much. I could never have borne it. He turns the pages of the book, slowly, his two front-on eyes scanning across its writings and drawings and remembering. I can tell his god's tricks must be making it into sense for him, because a couple of times at the saddest bits he has to stop and shake himself down and wipe at the soft, not quite a beak above his mouth parts. I says nothing, and I let him read. Even before dawn, rowdy elements and respectful voters are gathered outside, calling up to hear news of what the god has told me, whether the god has saved me, and wanting me to guide and lead, as ever. I walk out, and the lift contraption is raised up to me. I think, no, not this day. I spread my wings out full, and glide down to meet my brothers and sisters. A stab in my shoulder warns me that with this one swoop I have probably flown my last, but I make sure no sign of the pain leaks through in my speech or manner. I tell them the good news. The god required no sacrifice of us, and had now departed. He came with a message that our efforts at gathering and remembering were pleasing to White Tommy, and we should carry them on as best we could. And he came with a warning that hard times were likely to stay, and we should set aside seed, salt what prey we could, save fuel, preserve and prepare, and make ourselves ready for wind and chop. The people, I know, were hoping for better news, but they let no sign of their disappointment leak through. As they spread wings to set about their tasks, there is a noise like the very skin of the world being torn in two. No trouble, I tells them. It is only the sound of the god departing. His chariot is not so quiet as our feathers, my friends. They laugh, not because what I have said is funny, but because they are worried, and I have given them chance to laugh. And given chance, my brave flock will always turn fear into laughter. I love them for their courage, and I hate being divided from them by what I know. For what I know is this: our world is ending. A rift has opened in space. Our world and our sun has fallen through into the universe next along. This universe is dead and empty, and claws at the very makings of life. Specific Healer thought he would be able to close the rift before it swallowed us, but he wasn't fast enough. Already the stars are going out, and soon we will fly into a night that is absolutely dark. The moment we passed over, this new universe's pipework began to unravel the stuff that makes up our sun, our earth, and our bodies. It is too late to save us. Before long, it will be as if we never existed at all. Specific Healer was weeping as he told me this. I found myself laying a gentle claw on the shoulder of a god. Many times over these hard years, I have sung that nothing is lost. Nothing is lost. Nothing is ever lost. Before now, I have never known what those words might mean. I sang them because they were a comfort for the dying and the left behind. Before he left, I gave Specific Healer our book of gathering and remembering. It will survive the end of our world, and the end of all of us. I look up into the deep blue before dawn sky. For a beat there is a claw point of light, just across from where the winter late star should be. Specific Healer's chariot punching between the universes, letting a moment of starshine leak through from the other side. A last goodbye from the little, lonely god, and from our home. Nothing is lost. I will try to believe that.